I'm Agnes Rennie and I chair the board of Úrosairach Gausa, Colson Estate Trust. Our trust took ownership of 56,000 acres, which is essentially a big swathe of land in the northwest corner of Lewis. The vision that we had in buying the land was probably quite simply that by owning the land, by owning that asset, we could probably do more with it than the existing private landowners were doing, and that we would be able to do different kinds of things, both for and with the community.
There's three things you look for in a good community: ambition, leadership, which is people, and an asset. One of the things we've learned from the Highlands and Islands is good communities develop only with an asset.
You know, wind was something that we had available to us as a fairly readily accessible asset. We've developed a major revenue stream through the construction of 3 wind turbines, as well as the funds which would be retained specifically for the benefit of the future of the trust, for securing the future of the trust, that there would also be a proportion that would be made available for projects within the community. To date, probably around £350,000 has been dispersed.
People's Community Trust was formed in 2012. The ex-servicemen's club in the centre of Peebles went into administration, and so we took ownership of that towards the end of last year. So we now have quite a large building which has been in social use for 100 years.
We're looking at community land ownership, but really what we've been looking at is community ownership of assets of all kinds. You know, so the landscape, there's our cultural heritage, all of these things which are there to be built on and not be exploited. It's our responsibility as a community and as a community group to make sure that these things are protected.
As communities now get to a point where they look at what the asset is that they want to do, whether that's money from wind farms, whether it's a building, or indeed it's land, then we'll be working with them to help them do that. Highlands and Islands, as you know, got its own agency 54 years ago. The South of Scotland deserved its own economic development agency. It's not just all about economics, it's about making sure that the environment and communities are helped as well, very much like Highlands and Islands. The Scottish Government now has this place strategy, which says that every place is different. So trying to get a one-size-fits-all to put into everything is just not the way of doing it.
Organisations like the Highlands and Islands Development Board, they created conditions where communities and community organisations were encouraged to look at what they could do themselves.
Back in about 2011, there were at the time a number of high street shops that were closed. Some had been closed for quite a while, but we felt that the market wasn't dealing with it.
When we bought the land, the estate at that time didn't employ anybody, not one person. To now, we have 13 people working for us. 13 people employed in the community, by the community.
Our largest traditional employer in town was a mill, and they closed the businesses on that site. It's a 5.5 hectare site. Again, in the centre of Peebles, it's about 250 yards from the high street. It's been the life of the town. Up until 2000, when most people who lived in Peebles worked in Peebles, most families had maybe 2 people working in that mill. We were looking to just ensure that it continued to contribute to the economic life and cultural life of the town, which the owners, I would say, were really oriented to make as much money out of housing. And so we're now in a situation where a large site might be designated for mixed development. What does that mean? Oh, a supermarket and a bunch of houses. And you say, that really doesn't meet the community's requirements. So we've put a community right to buy registration, which has been approved. We can look at seeking to purchase the whole of that area for development as a care facility, a training hub, a creative incubator, affordable housing, and hopefully something like accommodation over workshops.
So they're very different drivers across the communities. I've been doing some work up in the Ettrick Valley with the community there in Ettrick. Theirs is to keep the population stable so that the primary school numbers don't drop anymore, because if they do, then the local council's liable to close the primary school.
In 2016, we went out and we did a completely new consultation. And out of that came our strategic plan, a 10-year strategic plan. Now what's happening is that there's a whole programme of activities which are largely coordinated by the Trust, promoted by the Trust, but delivered by others.
The big thing was when we actually got a paid administrator coordinator, so that's someone who's an anchor person who's there. That has really transformed how we operate, because someone is there, whereas before you were reliant on volunteers.
There's an expectation on the part of many in the community that the Trust is an organisation that they can approach. People will go into the Trust office to report that a street light isn't working. People will go into the Trust office asking, you know, why is it that the buses aren't running, blah, 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 you know. People will ask about other services. They would never, ever imagine of driving or taking the bus to Stornoway to go into the factor's office to ask these kind of questions of the private landowners.
I think the guiding force is community ownership in terms of the community owning the ideas and the plans going forward. So the material ownership of land is not as important as that engagement process, identifying what the priorities are within the community, and our motto is helping the community help the community.
I think the kind of the resilience of the community that we're part of to look at what their problems are and find ways of addressing these problems goes back a long time. Not only do we have an increasing number of micro businesses, an increasing number of small to medium-sized businesses continuing to provide services within the community, but we have a readiness on the part of young people, and a lot of them creatives, to create businesses for themselves which allow them to live and work within the community that they want to be part of. That is then extended to quite a lot of these people being ready to bring that imagination, that energy, to working with community groups.
But I do think it's back to making sure there's a robust case at the beginning, doing feasibility work with the communities to make sure that when they do apply for funding, whether it's with a land fund or wherever else it is, their case is robust.
This is our community, and we believe that right now we need to look at some of these things. Otherwise, you know, our community is in trouble. An organisation that can genuinely demonstrate and evidence that it's speaking with a voice that's bigger than its own voice, that a voice that represents a wider community, then, you know, you're a voice then that has to be listened to.